Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. I thought I'd do a video looking back at my pre-season predictions and how badly they worked out for Tottenham this season. Spoiler alert, I got pretty much all of them wrong, barring one, which was quite a crucial one, but even that had a massive caveat to it. And I thought I'd do it for a few reasons. It's a bit of fun, quite happy to sort of laugh at myself and how much I got it wrong. Albeit at the end of it, you may look back and go, wow, this guy really doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. And based on his predictions, I think maybe that is a fair takeaway. But also, I think it sort of speaks to how mad this season's been for Spurs and how I think most people wouldn't have called what ended up happening. Yes, I suppose in hindsight, some fans would have thought the drop-off in Ange's first season after that amazing first 10 games did hint at problems that were coming in the league the following season, but not to this extent. Obviously, injuries came into it, but then obviously they went and won the Europa League as well. So it's been a madcap season, and I think even sort of on an individual basis, there were lots of calls I made on players in my 10 predictions that for a lot of those players, they had different seasons to one I was certainly expecting. And I wonder what you think too, and whether you might watch this and go, "Wow, you got it completely wrong," and now and how did you even suggest that in the first place, or whether you yourselves also felt like you had a similar sort of inkling when the season began, and it just hasn't panned out that way at all. Anyway, I'll start off with my first one. So I did to start off with, I did do a video on this right at the bottom of the feed. If you scroll right down, it's one of my first few videos. It was back when I had probably about 30 followers, subscribers at that point, and had about 100 views, and the thumbnail and the I wouldn't say the quality of the video, because I think I actually even put subtitles on that, which took a long time to edit. Might be pretty similar to the sort of lo-fi way I do these for quick reactions, but definitely the thumbnail is pretty old school. But it was also quite nice to do this, because it gives me a second to sort of reflect on this season after this 1 year of doing videos after games and after press conferences, and when little things happen here and there, and this little group of subscribers that I've grown throughout here. So I'm eternally grateful for anyone who watches these videos. I'm very surprised, still surprised that anybody does, and it's just quite fun talking about Tottenham. Many of you constantly ask me, who do I support? No, I am not a Tottenham fan, but Newcastle are the team that I grew up supporting. But yes, I'm invested in the Spurs story, covering them each week. I'm a football reporter who covers them week in, week out. Pretty much every day is spent sort of trying to write something or thinking about what's going on with Spurs at the moment. So hence why I quite enjoy doing these videos. And I think some of the feedback I regularly get is that having that impartiality, that's a word, it is a word, over Tottenham, not being a supporter, can sometimes help and become a little bit more balanced, or at least a little bit more calm when the team aren't playing well, which has been a lot of times this season. Anyway, let's get into those predictions. So the first one, which I thought was pretty nailed on, to be honest, and why did I get wrong, was that Dominic Solanke was going to score 20 Premier League goals. In the little video, so again, I'll put a link to it in the below, so you can check it out rather than having to scroll through all the videos to find it. It was done at the Tottenham training ground after one of the early press conferences, maybe even, I think it might have been after ahead of the first game of the season, because remember Bissouma's suspension by the club for filming himself taking nitrous oxide, which seems like a long time ago now, was a part of the story of the day. So yeah, that was when it was, and I was sort of wandering around the training ground. Clearly needed a haircut because it was a very windy day and my hair was all over the shop. Have a watch anyway if you can be bothered. But anyway, Solanke, I thought he was the ideal signing. Really fit into the Ange style of play. Yes, a lot of money, 65 million, but I thought he would really fit. I thought he'd score a lot of those cutbacks that we saw so many times in the first season under Ange. And he would be there to put them away. So I thought 20 Premier League goals wasn't even that much of a shout for a player who'd scored 19 of them for Bournemouth the season before. Spurs create so many chances, or at least they were creating so many chances. I thought he was nailed on. I did also say that he was going to get back in the England squad, which did turn out to be right. And I'm going to hang on to any kind of crumbs of correct calls here, because there aren't many, trust me. He ended up with 9, so nowhere near 20. One of those was a penalty in that final game against Brighton. He obviously was injured for a good chunk of the season when he damaged his knee, trying to have a shot in training back in January. He was out for what turned out to be, I think, about a couple of months or not far off it. And he got injured in that first game against Leicester and was out for the first couple of games, which even though he wasn't the sort of worst hit by injuries this season, for a player who was perennially fit for Bournemouth previously and has amazing injury record, generally, or fitness record, it sort of speaks to Spurs' crazy season with injuries that he was also getting injured this season. I still think he's been a really good signing, because I think of what he brings to the team with his relentless running, his pressing, his ability when he does get chances has been pretty good. But I guess the key point is that he hasn't really had that many of those chances. If anything, he's been more of an occupier of a centre forward, creating space for other players and not being in those positions to sort of finish those tap-ins as much as I thought he would be. And I know obviously the right winger, Johnson in particular, is the finisher in the team, but last season I swear when Sonny was playing centre forward or Richarlison when he's fit, definitely during that purple patch for Richarlison over the winter period, the centre forward did get a lot of chances from cutbacks. So I'm kind of surprised that hasn't happened for Solanke this season. And even though I think he's been a good signing, I think for the money that they spent, they should be expecting more next season. He definitely needs to hit double figures in the league. And I think he'll be slightly disappointed with his end product, his goal tally by the end of the season, if not from his own personal performances. I think he's been good, apart from the goal tally, and obviously played a key role in going all the way in Europe, particularly with that ice-cool penalty in Frankfurt, and scoring against Bordeaux as well in the semi-final too. Anyway, that was the first one, way off the mark there. The second one perhaps is even more of a miss. Archie Gray to establish himself as Tottenham's first choice defensive midfielder. Now, I thought he was a really exciting signing when Gray came in, and I was probably influenced by the fact that the Basuma news had happened that day, and it felt like, Basuma was coming to the end of his time at Spurs, to a certain extent, or the final year perhaps, or definitely in Ange's bad books, and had a lot of work to get back into the team, having had not a great second half to the season the year before. And Gray for 40 million, which is, let's remember, the most expensive, or I think it was the fourth most expensive 18-year-old ever spent by a club, and only behind, I think it was Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr. and the other Brazilian, Endrick, for Real Madrid. So, even though it was 30 million plus 10 million for Joe Rodon, that's 40 million was effectively what it was. It was a lot of money for a teenager. And he obviously didn't establish himself as the first choice defensive midfielder at all. If anything, that position still is totally up for grabs. I still feel like maybe that'll be an area that they look to buy someone, particularly if Ange does stay on. I think he really needs an experienced player in that position. I think it's a hard position to play for anyone in Ange's ideal system, where he wants to play one holding midfielder who has to basically do everything, beat the press, defend on his own pretty much. It's no surprise, I think I said this the other day, that Basuma has done better in recent weeks when Ange's gone to a two double pivot. It's just less on him to have to do. And I don't think as good as Bentancur is, and I'm not sure he's the ideal player for that holding midfield role either, so there's probably someone they need to bring in. I would have thought Gray might establish himself a bit more this season in that position, but he didn't get many chances. Obviously, we know he played numerous games at centre-back during the injury crisis over the winter, and he coped really well, to be fair, in that situation. But, definitely wrong on that one. Gray to establish himself as first choice defensive midfielder. And to be honest, at this stage, it feels like it's hard to see that happening next season, but look, lots can change, so let's see. The next one, I think the jury's probably a bit out on this one. I predicted that this would be Richarlison's last season, mainly through his injury record and Spurs getting frustrated by it. Now, I thought Richarlison, when he's been fit for Ange, has been very effective. He's scored goals, he's made things happen, he's been, as I've said numerous times, this agent at chaos who's really stepped up for Ange. But the problem is he has been injured so much, and this season he's been injured for most of it. Yes, he came back for the crucial part and played a big role in the team going all the way in the Europa League. Thought he played really well in the first until he came off against Man United in the final. And I think he is a real useful asset who is clearly very passionate about the club, and one that, again, if Ange stays, I could see him wanting to keep Richarlison. But there is a question mark for the club, really, over a player who's had this much of an injury record, over whether, if they got an offer that they wanted to take, that was a fairly decent offer, maybe it'd be the right time to cash in. Be interested to see what you think, whether you think it's time to do that if they get that offer, or if because of what he's shown in the last few weeks and when he has played for Ange, he's such a talent that he's worth keeping and hoping he can get over these injuries ahead of next season. I don't know. But there's also the added question of, will they get the offer they want after so many injury-plagued seasons? I don't know. But so yeah, jury's out on that one. We'll wait to see on Richarlison this summer what will happen. Next one was left back. The lack of cover at left back was going to be proved costly this season. And I would say this is kind of an ish one. I was surprised that they didn't go for another left back in the summer. I thought just to leave it to Destiny Udogie was risky because it's a lot, one player, and Udogie obviously went on to get injured like so many other players this season. But I don't think any of us were banking on Jed Spence to emerge like he has this season. And now, with the way he has emerged in the second half of the season, it doesn't really feel like the club is lacking as much at left back as they were. He's still a right-footed player who's naturally a right back, even though I think his performance has been better at left back. So you could argue they could still do with some cover. And actually, to be honest, this comment about them not needing a left back would have been probably a lot more, what's the words? You would have been a lot more sort of resolute in that opinion a few months ago when he was playing really well and really contributing. I remember after that Brentford win, the 2-0 win at Brentford, he was fantastic in that game, I believe at left back in that match. And he has really, at that point, people were talking about how he should definitely be in the England squad, and then he wasn't. But then towards the end of the season, he hasn't quite had the same impact. He obviously, Ange prefers a natural left footer in Udogie in his back four and Porro at right back. So he sort of struggled to get into the team for the key games in the Europa League. Then in the Premier League, it was obviously much changed teams all the time that he was having to play in. So it was difficult for anyone. But I don't think his performances were quite at the same level as they were before. Funny enough, ever since that Rio Ferdinand interview he did, I don't feel like he's been given as much responsibility as he was before. And to be honest, I don't think I'm not saying it's connected, but it just feels like the timing seems to be like after that. It doesn't feel like there's been as much of an impact where we're all talking about Jed Spence and how he needs to play for England and how he needs to start for Spurs since. So I don't know, maybe after that and with the added games next season, perhaps they do need still need a left back cover for Udogie, and Spence could stick to right back. But yeah, I said it would be costly, and again, it's an ish one. It's probably not, to be honest, the way Spence performed. I don't think it cost them as much as I thought they would. So the thrilling games would continue for Tottenham. I just felt like Ange's style this season, Ange's style at Spurs generally wouldn't change much, and we'd still see loads of crazy matches. I don't know about that one. That's another ish, because to be honest, the way they've won their biggest game of the season, let's be honest, was a pretty dull match. I mean, obviously it wasn't from a Spurs fan point of view. Everyone was on tenterhooks to see if they could get over the line. But Man United in the final was a poor quality game. Definitely the opposite of Ange Ball, as the fun phrase now goes. It's more Ange Wall than Ange Ball. But then again, you still have matches like 4-3 over Man United in the League Cup. That was a pretty bonkers game. Obviously the 6-3 at home to Liverpool. Battering Southampton 5-0 away. The 4-3 madness against Chelsea, where they lost. Still plenty of goals, particularly in that first half of the season. It was more in the second half of the season once they started to try and play a more defensive style of play, where the thrill factor lessened a bit. So I'm going to say ish on that one, but I think I'm being generous to myself. I also said the set piece goals will still be an issue, considering set pieces, but I think that's wrong, to be fair. I think overall they haven't been too bad, although ironically against Brighton on the last day of the season, albeit the players had been on a 72-hour partying before then, so that must have been related. They did actually concede 2 goals from corners, those 2 Jack Hinchelwood goals, basically the same replicas of themselves. Corner comes in, Spurs don't really clear it properly, and Hinchelwood's Johnny on the spot to put it away. And there were other moments. They obviously did concede from set pieces in other games, but so does every team, and I don't feel like it was as much of a problem as it had been. Last season it was a real issue. In a season that was good, to be honest, but where we were being more hypercritical, whereas there have been so many problems, particularly in the league this season, that to sort of focus on set-piece goals would be unfair. Definitely hasn't been the main issue, I don't think. Then I said Son would go back to left wing. That was right. And that Werner would turn into a bit of a super sub. That was definitely wrong. Timo Werner, a lot of you called it at the time, didn't understand why they were bringing him back on loan. I thought in his first season on loan, when he came to Ange, he actually did contribute, and he was quite a shrewd loan signing in that season with his rapid pace. Everyone knows he struggles to finish. He's a poor finisher in front of goal at this stage, I think it's fair to say. But his pace did stretch teams and did add to the way Ange wanted to play at that time. I did say in the summer when they loaned him, I didn't think it was a bad. I personally didn't think it was a bad signing. It was more what they could have got instead, and at the time I thought, well, it might have made more sense to go out and buy someone, but someone better and spend more of your money on a top class left winger. But I guess they thought Sonny would be able to carry it more. Richarlison played wide left, and Werner would be sort of an extra body, but they needed him more. That position, whoever they brought in would have ended up being more relied on than they thought because of injuries. And I think Werner really didn't live up to any kind of expectations. Again, a lot of fans already thought that was going to be the case, so fair play to you guys. But I think Werner's output was pretty disappointing in the end. Obviously, he had that moment against Rangers where he got hauled off at half-time, and Ange went for him in the press conference afterwards. He later said that it was just feedback, but it was quite a rare moment of Ange being very critical of a player in public. He very rarely does that. He's very rarely done that this season. I think there's an argument to be said that had he done that again to other players, particularly ones who were contracted to the club as opposed to loan players, he risked losing the dressing room, and that's been a big part of his success, is how connected the dressing room has been throughout this season. Has been a big contributor to them going all the way in the Europa League, and he's referenced that many times. But maybe being a lone player, it was easier to have a go at Werner, or maybe he was just frustrated with what he was producing. I mean, the only moment really you can think of for Werner where he did well this season was against Man City in the League Cup, where he scored that goal. I still believe that was his only goal of the season. Great finish, to be fair, instinctive finish. And I thought Old Trafford, even though he wasted chances in the 3-0 towards the end of Erik ten Hag's time, I thought he did stretch United a lot and caused them problems. But overall, very disappointing. Definitely not a super sub. Nowhere to be seen really for the last few months in terms of contributing on the pitch, because Ange sort of didn't use him. Obviously, he was left out of the Europa League squad as well, second half of the season. Sonny obviously went back to left wing. He's had a difficult season himself. Obviously, it's ended on a triumphant note with winning his first trophy. But I still feel going into the summer that left wing is somewhere where they really do need to strengthen. And if they can get someone like a Bericci, Eze, then they should really snap. They should really go for it. I think it'd be a great signing. Next one was Ange wouldn't change. This has proved to be wrong again. Generally, that was the case for a lot of the season. But that was not been the case towards the end of the season. He's changed massively. As I said before, the Ange ball to the Ange wall. It's what got Spurs over the line in Europe. It's what won them the Europa League, their first trophy in 17 years, their first European trophy in 41 years, and got them back into the Champions League. I mean, the final we talked about this a few times, but like you just cannot get over the statistics from the final. 27% possession, 3 shots, completed passes were around in the 100 as opposed to the 500. I think it was for Man United. I can't remember the exact numbers. I remember Tom Allnut of the Times, my good friend on the Tottenham Way podcast, saying that the most frequent passing combination, i.e. one player to another, in the game from Spurs was Vicario to Solanke, long ball. All the defenders were whacking it long when they could. It was a classic Jose Mourinho approach, really, and it got them over the line. It was the right thing to do because it won them the game. But it was a massive, massive departure from Ange ball, what Postecoglou had been espousing as his philosophy and how he would never go away from it. When we were asking him many times, people were asking him many times last season if he would adapt, and he made the point regularly about how if you start going away from your principles, what are you left with effectively? I was constantly saying last season that I felt like he didn't have to ditch all his principles, but he could make little tweaks here and there. But to be honest, he's gone. It's not just making tweaks that won in the Europa League. It's massive changes. I'd say little tweaks would be playing 2 holding midfielders instead of just one. And he did do that. But on top of that, when you look at the numbers, the approach, it's so different to what Postecoglou had been producing the first season, the start of this season, for a lot of parts of this season as well. It left you wondering why he didn't do it more in the Premier League earlier this year. I'm not really sure why. Had he done that, he might have got more. He might have nicked a few better results. He might have lessened the impact and put himself in a position where people would not really be focusing so much on they would talk about a poor league, but maybe mid-table, and it'd be a lot easier it would feel like it would give him a much better chance of hanging on to his job after winning the Europa League. But there you go. Anyway, so that was definitely wrong. He definitely did change. If anything, that's probably the most wrong out of this list. And maybe the most surprising, based on what he was saying and how passionately he was talking about how he couldn't, this is the reason why he won't change last season when he was asked numerous times. But he did. Penultimate one. I think this is wrong as well. I said other fans will become well aware of Mikey Moore. Now, there's a caveat to this. Mikey Moore, obviously 17-year-old. In fact, I'm not quite sure if he's turned 18 yet or not, but one of the hottest prospects, most exciting young talents to come out of Spurs since Kane. And if anything, people weren't even going on about Kane when he was at the same age. It was later on he really kicked on. Academy products, Mikey Moore, really exciting. He has been involved with the first team quite a lot. He obviously had that illness that laid him low for quite a long time. That didn't help. He did have that performance against AZ Alkmaar in the group phase, or the league phase, rather than the knockouts against Alkmaar, where they beat them 1-0 at home and had that mazy dribble which basically went viral, and a lot of fans started picking up on Mikey Moore. So at that point, you could sort of see my prediction sort of starting to maybe come true. But unfortunately, that was basically it. He didn't really contribute for the rest of the season, like I said, because of his illness, and then because Spurs were in such a bad way, and started to not rely so much on younger players, particularly young players. When Gray was, when the centre-backs came back, it wasn't like he suddenly started playing Archie Gray at defensive midfield. He left him out, stuck with the likes of Basuma and Bentancur. And again, the experienced players got him over the line in the end, and Moore being even younger. Yes, he was on the bench, I believe, for the final, if I can remember rightly, but he hasn't really been involved of late. And there's nothing... probably the right decision from Postecoglou. It got them over the line in the Europa League. But the way the season panned out, it's not surprising not to see that Moore wasn't that involved, really, towards the end, because it was a time for experience to sort of try and get them through, rather than young players, where I think Ange even talked about this before, where if you throw them in at the deep end when it's going badly, it can really have a detrimental and damaging effect on their careers long term. So maybe it was the right thing to do, and plus there was that illness. But I did think he was going to, from what I was hearing, because of how exciting he is as a talent, he would have a bit more of an impact. But obviously it didn't work out that way. So after a long list of wrong calls, I finally got the last one right. But even that wasn't really correct. So I said Spurs would qualify for the Champions League. They did. But I think I was kind of talking about how they might qualify through the league. And obviously that couldn't have been more wrong. They finished 17th. The worst possible place without being relegated. 22 defeats in the league, which is a record for a team that hasn't been relegated from the Premier League. The most ever in the Premier League, obviously. Tottenham, their worst ever league campaign, a crazy campaign. Obviously, had they been in genuine danger of relegation, they probably would have found a way of picking up a few more results instead of just using it as this bizarre exercise to keep players fit for the Europa League, which paid off by winning it. But ultimately, they did get into the Champions League because they won the Europa League. So I was right? Yep, I'm claiming that one. Definitely claiming that one. Anyway, let me know what you think. Why I should never do predictions again, albeit this is quite a fun exercise to go back and look at how to sort of underline what a mad season it's been and how, I wasn't even making crazy outlandish calls here. I was probably being quite conservative with my calls, but they were completely off the charts. Let me know any thoughts that you had from this season on what you thought was going to happen and how you massively got it wrong, or anything that you called early doors has proved to be the case. And I will have a long, hard think about my predicting abilities going into next season. Cheers, guys.